All right, what's up, y'all? I'm Jay Miller, and I'm super excited to be giving this talk at Render ATL 2024. But I did want to make sure that I have a copy of this for myself because I also want to give this talk at some other places. I think there's a lot to learn in the world of Playwright, and there's a lot of benefits to folks that want to adopt end-to-end testing, even when you're not a full stack developer or you're not a developer in your day-to-day. So in this upcoming talk, you're going to see a couple of different personas that I take on to examine a full stack application and really think about how I would test this from those different roles. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So I don't normally show these disclaimers of who I am, but I feel like in this, it's really important to know that first and foremost, by trade, I'm not a full stack developer. I'm a developer advocate, which means that a lot of the things that I make often come with a scale problem. So even as someone who is not often building with other people in mind, outside of the scope of a talk or a meetup or some event like that, I really do believe that it is important to test. And I do think that more than anything, you do need tests. There is no conversation around this. Whether you are a janitor, whether you are a full stack engineer, you need to verify that the thing that you're about to do isn't going to come with much greater consequences. However, there always comes with this issue of testing without ownership. It is actually pretty hard. Testing without ownership is one of those things that if you're not careful, you wind up getting yourself into a little bit of trouble. Or you just get rejected. Usually that's the route that I wind up going. Hey, I saw this bug. I wanted to add and then they're like, hey, cool, thanks for finding this bug. We're not going to add your thing because the thing that you added is now our responsibility to maintain. A friend of mine once called this like every feature or every addition to the code base is like going to the pet store and buying a puppy. Every issue is a trip to the pet store. Every feature is taking that puppy home. And then now you are responsible for maintaining that or taking care of that puppy for the rest of its existence. So there's often this hesitation of, hey, can you add this? Or I saw this thing over here. Immediate response is, I want to say no, or that engineer wants to say no because they understand that your drive-by contribution comes with a lifetime of commitment on my end and not necessarily yours when it comes to doing these things. That said, how do you test something if you don't have access to the overall code base and you're getting friction on the end of, well, how do I showed you that this was a problem and then you fixed it your way, but now I'm still seeing problems. How do you get around doing that? And I thought this is kind of like hot wiring a car. Now, maybe hot wiring a car that you own, or maybe hot wiring a car that like you own and the key's like stuck in the ignition and kind of broke. Like, I'm not advocating for people to go and start like hot wiring cars. I'm mostly just advocating for maybe there's a workaround to getting that thing going instead of doing it the normal way. And this is where our protagonist here and kind of the hero of this talk comes in. Now, Playwright is a tool that was created by Microsoft. It is an open source tool, which means you can see how it works and you can also go in and make contributions to it that provides end-to-end testing. Now, those who are in the end-to-end testing space that don't know about Playwright might be familiar with tools like Selenium or Cypress. And very much it is doing the same thing, just doing it slightly differently. I have a great friend of mine named Andrew Knight that goes into some of the technical pieces behind the scene of how it interacts with the DOM differently than some of these other tools. But what you need to know is ultimately you have a multi-language supported end-to-end framework that provides assistance in writing tests. Because again, none of us are test engineers. I should have asked for a raise of hands of how many people here are actual QA engineers or testing engineers. I'm also hoping, hey, maybe there are a few in the audience that you can come up after the presentation and show me how I could use Playwright to do things I didn't even know I could. Now, for those that saw me say end-to-end testing and you're just kind of wondering what that means, I like to use end-to-end testing to say testing from all angles. So often as me being a Python developer, I'm usually in the back end. So I'm writing Python code from a web framework, usually something like Django or Fast API. And I want to be able to take my code and write a test that interacts with my code, not with the outcome of the code. End-to-end testing is basically like thinking of a triangle and saying, I'm testing the database layer, I'm testing the back-end layer, I'm testing the front-end layer. But another way of looking at it is testing your application from all of its angles, from all of its different approaches. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this. Now, a little bit about this project. Unfortunately, it is a locally ran project, so I'm going to be able to show it to you. If you want to try to run this yourself, I will tell you, you do need some database options. Again, I work at a company called Ivan that provides data storage and AI solutions in the form of data solutions across multiple clouds. So whether you're an Azure shop, an AWS shop, a GCP shop, or you want to be all of those things at the same time, we make it really easy and simple to quickly get started. Now, you're not going to hear me talk much more about that. We are going to utilize one of the databases that we do have up in the system, but know that all of the services that I have running are running using the Ivan platform. So if you want to get set up quickly, you're going to need a Postgres database, an OpenSearch instance, and a Redis data store. And I would probably suggest you take a look at Ivan because we offer all of those as one-click solutions to get you off and running to the races. But you can check out the repo here. You can take a look at it. You'll see it up on the screen. What it basically is a sidebar. I do a podcast called Conduit. It is a podcast that is based on creating productivity solutions for people who don't get paid to think about productivity. This is that challenge of you get told by some productivity guru not to check your email first thing in the morning. However, your job is to work at a help desk where if you don't check your email first thing in the morning, you get fired. So we try to create a more tangible approach to looking at our own personal productivity and the productivity of those around us through biweekly accountability, check-ins with our community, and a few other things. But this is the Conduit coach. This is the Conduit productivity coach. We call him Superconductor. And Superconductor is an retrieval augmented generation pattern, or the standard AI pattern chatbot. I say chatbot very loosely. It's not really a chatbot. It's more of like a search solution assistant in a web app form that's driven by Fast API, which is a Python web framework with Tailwind on the front end to make it look nice. So that being said, play around with the repo, take a look at it. We're going to keep going. Now, again, I'm a Python developer. I've said that enough times, mostly because I'm jaded because Render Atlanta didn't have Python as an option of languages that I might be interested in on the form, but that's okay. So we're going to be using Python in this. JavaScript fans, you're in luck. There's also a JavaScript version of this exact framework. So I'm going to be using PyTest, which is a Python testing platform, but you can use it with other JavaScript testing frameworks as well to get the outcome that you're looking for. Also, joining me are going to be some of the awkward turtles, because when I think of awkward, I always think of the awkward turtle because I grew up in that era, and also this Joker is super adorable. But this is our UI UX awkward turtle. And as a UI UX developer, of course, I'm expecting a certain type of user flow. So when a a user comes into the site, I'm thinking they're going to go here, they're going to click these buttons, they're going to interact with it a certain way. Now, Playwright operates kind of in three modes, and I call like the three pillars of Playwright. You have like your page object, which is your browser interface, and you have a page you go to, you locate, and then you interact with. So you go to, you locate, you interact with, and the interact could also be a visualization. And the way that we do that is we write it almost like you would write the sentence. You say, go to this URL. I expect the page to have this thing, and then I want to interact with it or verify that it is visible, that it is hidden, or that it doesn't exist on the page, or that I want to click if it's a button or a link, or I want to fill if I want to provide input to go to the form. Now, again, I hear you saying, Jay, that's great. I'm not a Python developer. I don't know how to write this code. Or I'm, again, UI UX developer, not necessarily a backend person. I don't know how to write this code. Well, you're in luck because Playwright has this amazing feature called CodeGen. And CodeGen is absolutely the strongest feature, in my opinion, of Playwright. There's some other great ones that we'll talk about, but CodeGen is the thing that makes this talk shine. Because if you don't know how to do a thing, you can just do it in CodeGen, and then CodeGen will give you the code. Now, I understand we see gen, we think of generative AI and all that. It's not. It's literally just interacting with a web page and then creating the code for the interactions that you made. And it's doing it using whatever language you want. You can even switch it up in the middle. You can say, I want it in PyTest, pure PyTest, Python lingo, or I want it in the Playwright version, or I want it in the JavaScript version, or I want it in the Java version. You can choose which one you want. And here's an example of that working. So as we're looking at this right now, what we're seeing is, as I go to this page and I type in, localhost 8000 to go to my site locally, we're going to see over in the second window here in this inspector that it added page.goto, go to this thing. As I'm hovering over things, you can see it's kind of like that browser inspector window, and it's giving me the actual locator code to select a thing. And when I click on it, we see that the code gets updated into going into that next thing. And if I do, click a link, then it's going to do that whole go to this link and then click the link and then do a thing. And we can even see how, even if it takes us off of our site, it's still running because we're testing through the front end. What we've done is we've basically created a browser window, and every time we interact with that browser window, regardless of how we interact with it, this gives us the ability to present. Now, I often do this in a form of, I often take advantage of this in a form called smoke testing, which means I'm not testing my production site all the time, but there are some things that I do want to do on the production site just to make sure things are good. So I might have two different tests, local tests that run against a local version of my site that touches test databases that can be spun up quickly, torn down quickly, dumped, no data is persisted across the platform. And then I do want to interact with the actual real website. I might not be adding any mission critical, I'm not adding any data to it, but I do want to just give a quick check. And we call those smoke tests because obviously where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So that was Playwright CodeGen, and that is maybe how a UI UX developer would take a look at this. So the next one is, I'm a DBA. Of course, I'm noticing multiple or inefficient queries through telemetry spikes. I noticed that in these rushes where we thought we were getting we're only getting 100 users per hour, but we're getting 200 queries per hour. And I'm wondering wait, why is it double what it should be? Or a good example of this, I just implemented a new feature to where we added a Redis cache. So now if you search something that is extremely similar to something that someone else has already searched, I don't have to ping my AI API. I don't have to pay for that extra query. If it's close enough, I'm just going to use that. And what that'll look like is very similar, where we're doing all the Playwright things. Here we're actually asking our AI coach something. So we're giving it a little bit more time to hit the API and generate and do stuff. So we're setting custom timeouts here. But you can see in this test, I'm sending the same query. Now, I don't know, and I really honestly don't want to mess around with all of the requests.get, and then here's my headers, and then here's my form data, and then now I need to send that form data, and then how do I check to see the response on that form data? I'm not testing any of that stuff. All I'm testing is when a user goes to the placeholder that says, ask me about checking email or doing some other stuff, that I populate it with the query, and then I hit ask our AI coach, and then I populate it with the query again, and I ask the AI coach again. And then I can use my knowledge of the database architecture that I'm a professional in and say, hey, Redis, I want you to check and see how many instances in this brand new empty, there's nothing in it Redis cache that I have. How many instances are there? Because there should only be one, since I asked the exact same thing 2 times. And ultimately, if I get 2, then I know that there's something wrong. So that gives me ammunition to go to our backend team, who maybe implemented the sending the information to the Redis cache or verifying that the threshold. I mean, obviously I sent the same query twice. It should be the same, right? Exact. So yeah, with this, I don't have to know too much about how the backend works. I just have to know how I can interact with the web interface. And then I can check against the things that I do know and that I do have control over to say, hey, something's not right. I ran this test. You're also able to run it. Okay, and now for our favorite part of every tech company, marketing, right? So as a marketer, of course, I expect my CTAs to show up where they're supposed to be. I want my ads over in the ad section. I want my pop-ups to pop up, and I want my stuff that gets obfuscated based on things like geography or device to not show up. Because ultimately, if I'm doing any type of hypothesis testing, I need to make sure that the environment is exactly what I'm trying to test. And the way that you do this is you can actually take browser context arguments and pass them directly in to Playwright as you're running these tests. Now, what I've done is I've used the power of PyTest, because PyTest will allow me to run the same test multiple times, but with different parameters. It's called parameterization. I'm using parameterization to change the context arguments for my Playwright test. And the way that I'm doing it here is I'm saying this is a different device called an iPhone 12, a Pixel 5, and then we also have a desktop that's running Chrome. Now, PyTest has registered devices that it will look at that and it'll change the width, the height, it'll change the headers on the actual query. So your request headers will change, so it'll look like it's coming from an iPhone 12. But you can do more than that. You can also set your location. You can set fake GeoIP information to emulate coming from a particular part of the world or a particular region. And this will allow you to do things like A/B testing without having to generate large swaths of A/B testing. And you can do this 50 times, 100 times, and just verify it, and then see if you're getting the results. Now, how do you see if you're getting the results? Simple. You do what's called a show trace. Now, in PyTest, there's a command that you can do called PyTest, or it's PyTest Playwright, or PyTest test, and then whatever you're testing, and then you do -- tracing, and you just turn tracing on. Or you can say, I only want to retain the failures. And what we wind up getting with this is a really interesting concept. So when we run Playwright show trace, we're given this file, and we give it that file. And what we're given is this trace viewer. Now, the trace viewer is a walk through the actual test. And it's going through the individual steps of that test. So if we said, go to the home screen, it's going to go to the home page. And then we're going to say, look for this button. See if this button's visible. See if it's not visible. And then it's going to make the attempt to look for it. On top of that, if we see something that we don't like, or if we're a little confused as to why something isn't happening, we can also inspect not just the entire window, but our individual window of that code as well. So this gives us the opportunity and ability to go in and say, I want to verify that the code that was written that did the thing isn't the problem, which in this case it was. I basically said when the viewport is a certain width, instead of hiding it, I wanted it to go down to the bottom, but I set the display to none. So yeah, naturally nothing showed up. And then our last awkward turtle here is for accessibility. Now, one of the things I really wanted to highlight about Playwright in this is that you are indeed, like I showed in that last slide, interacting with the actual web page. And we're allowed to inspect that web page. But what's even more important is we're actually allowed to do things to that web page while we're inspecting it. So we can actually inject JavaScript into a web page to interact with it in certain ways, or we can use different tools. Maybe they're like Chrome plugins or features that we want. So as an accessibility engineer, I want to make sure that my site is WCAG accessible. I want to make sure that I am keeping up to the standards and that our engineers are keeping up to the standards that we might be by law required to maintain. And there's an amazing tool that allows you to do this called Axe, and it's by DQ Labs, and they give you all of the different standards that you can check to verify if your site is up and running. Now, Axe is actually a JavaScript plugin, and it injects JavaScript to basically look at your site and give you all of the different issues that are wrong with it. And the amazing thing about this is a friend of mine, a former colleague, Pamela Fox, created a Python package that allows us to just take Axe and run it across a Playwright page. And again, if you're doing the JavaScript thing, you don't even have to do this. You can just run the Axe JavaScript directly. But we can also do it in Python as well now, which is fantastic. And with this, I can take the run and get the results of the run and then generate a report on it. Now, that's great if I'm at my computer, but what happens, on a Friday after I've left maybe 30 minutes to an hour early because I'm trying to get to the happy hour function? The reality is I can still have this run because all of this stuff generates files and I can use CI/CD to create an artifact. So here I have a snippet from a GitHub action, and this GitHub action, all it's doing is running my test. It's just running my accessibility testing. And then it's saying, hey, retain the traces on failure, like we showed a little bit, so that trace log, so I could go in and look at it if there was a problem. I also added a snippet to where we're doing that same Axe run in there. And since that creates files, if I put all of the files in the same folder, I'm then able to store that folder as a downloadable zip that I can then download when I get back to the office and say, oh, hey, someone did a thing. Which means now I can set this to run on a cron job. And if there are no problems, then hey, this nice little file stays clean and empty. I don't have to do anything. But if there are problems, then I just go in, I download the results. Maybe I have the results sent to me every Monday and I take a look at it and I go, okay, there's nothing new. You can also do snapshots. So you can do snapshot testing of, I knew that these things were bad. I had these problems before. Now I have these new problems. What's up with that? How do I fix that? Or I have less problems now. That's fantastic. Let me update something and make sure that people know that we're now good to go. And that's it. These are 4 different ways we can look at testing. And again, I just want to recap. I know that testing is hard. Testing is super hard. I reach for Playwright all the time because sometimes I just don't want to try to figure out how to write the test. Using tools like Playwright and Playwright CodeGen and Playwright Tracing, it's going to give you the ability to confidently write tests that test against the actual site itself and not the underlying code that maybe you are concerned about, but if you're a marketer or a accessibility engineer, you're probably not. You just want to verify that things are the way that you thought that they were, the way that you expected. And then now you can also use things like CI/CD to automate these, and artifact generation to take that information with you. And now you got a little bit more ammunition when you need to get awkward and talk to the folks that are responsible for actually implementing that fix. But thank you so much for listening to this talk. I'm Jay Miller. You can reach me at kjmiller.com. I'm also KJ Miller on like everything that I'm at. If I'm not there, then I'm not there. But yeah, hope to chat with you around the conference. Take care.